Welcome, everyone, to our final Faculty and Alumni Showcase Series for 2011. I can't believe it. I've just remembered to write 2011 on my checks, and now I have to write 2012. These years are going faster. So today, I'm very honored to welcome TU alumnus Robert Haslam to give today's CLE presentation. He is a 1986 graduate of the TU College of Law, where he was an active member of the Tulsa Law Journal. After graduation, Mr. Haslam went immediately into private practice and eventually launched his own law firm in 1995. Today, Mr. Haslam is a partner at Haslam and Gallagher in Fort Worth, Texas. He has tried hundreds of jury trials and has been recognized by the Texas Monthly as a super lawyer and a top attorney in Fort Worth magazine. Mr. Haslam has been a very strong supporter of the TU College of Law and of our Alumni Association, and I always look forward to my trips to Fort Worth and Dallas so that we have the opportunity to connect. Today, we are very pleased to have him here, and I will note that we are also very pleased and proud to have Mr. Haslam's son, Robert, as a current student here. Robert Haslam tells me that the title of his presentation is How to Have a Semi-Successful Practice. I know from knowing Robert Haslam and from speaking with him and from visiting his offices that he has a very successful practice. So please join me in welcoming Robert Haslam today.
Well, welcome everybody. First of all, thank you very much for having me. It really is an honor and a privilege to return to Tulsa Law School. I love this place, always have. First and foremost, they accepted me into law school, and that was really cool. I had 3 great years here, married my wife Lisa while I was in law school, and I'd look forward to answering any of your questions. We had quite a turn of events. I think if there's one thing to remember as you leave law school or you're out in the practice of law, it can change at any minute. And just be prepared for the changes and go with the flow. I've been asked to speak about starting a law practice. How do you go on your own? Seriously, please feel free to raise your hand and ask any question that you have as we go through this. I have about 12 slides. I think we have about an hour. If someone could, I don't carry a watch anymore. How's that? If someone could give me 15-minute warnings. Oh, there it is up there. There we go. That's good. I'll kind of know where I am, and I can keep pace now with the clock. Thank you. The age-old questions. Let me just jump right in, and I'll go through some of my history as I go through this. What to learn from your first job. Let me just kind of walk you through my history and how it evolved. I was here at Tulsa Law School. I grew up in Tulsa, and I love the oil capital of the world. And through friends, had decided that when I was in law school, I was going to be general counsel of an oil company. I didn't want a big oil company like Exxon, but I wanted a nice size oil company like Parker Drilling. I thought it'd be really cool to be Parker Drilling's general counsel. So I geared my law school around oil and gas. I minored in geology in college, and I had everything all set. And matter of fact, FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, came to town, and they did a speech, or they did something here at the law school when we had started the Oil and Gas Law Journal. And we took them out to dinner, and what's his name? Mr. Bernard. And this, again, is friendships. Mark Haney, a fellow law school student, had asked me to go with him. And before the end of the evening, he was asking me to apply to come work in Washington, D.C. And so I thought, that sounds like a fun deal. So we applied, and I say we, Lisa and I, and next thing you know, they accepted us. Only the problem was, and we picked out a place up in Alexandria, a little apartment on what you could afford back in those days, but Lisa could work in D.C., so 2 jobs. We all know how that works. The only problem was it was the spring of 1986, and if you ask anyone in the oil business back in those days, they can they'll probably be able to tell you where they were. And the oil business ended, kind of as we knew it in the spring of '86, and in visiting with friends and family members, there wasn't much hope. And staying in Tulsa in oil and gas, I was clerking at Prey Walker. They were kind enough to have me, but I had not looked to work for them. And so here we come in April and May of '86, and I just wasn't sure what to do. And I'd been made an offer by a trial firm down in Texas, and I really had no desire to move back to Texas to practice. And then they made me a really good offer, and I thought, well, oil and gas is down the tube, and next thing you know, we packed up and moved to Fort Worth, Texas. And I began my practice with a firm that did workers' comp defense. And I was very lucky to be with Dusty Fillmore. And if there's anything you can trade a little bit for at the beginning, if you can trade some of the money, go with someone that can train you and be the best in their profession. And I got very lucky with Dusty Fillmore because I can't thank him enough as I look back on the training that I received from him. So what do you learn from your first job? I was headed to Fort Worth, and Dusty Sr., kind of a dad figure. He's, I don't know how old he was then. He's, 130 now, I guess, maybe. I don't know. But Dusty took me under his wing and really trained me on how to defend lawsuits at the time. He had formed a new partnership with one of the best plaintiffs lawyers in Fort Worth, John Herrick, and it was Fillmore, Herrick, and Harrington. And so I got to train in a real litigation firm, primarily workers' comp defense. And John Herrick had some very large plaintiffs' cases and product liability. And I saw that for about a year and a half. And then that firm had 3 large cases that they settled and they tried and worked through, and they were kind of splitting up. And another lawyer that does only plaintiffs' practice made me an offer that I knew there was one lawyer that was interested in that job. And that was me. And so I decided to go with Dwayne Dent and Kugel, Stewart, Dent, and Frederick. And at that time it'd be, 88, 89? So I'd been with Dusty for about 2 years. But I think what's important to learn from that, and what I gleaned from it, is number one are the relationships. If there is anything that the practice of law is, it is about relationships. It's about your reputation, and it's about your relationships with other people, whether they be the adverse attorney, whether they be your client, whether they be people in the community that you're dealing with. I think the most important thing is your relationships with other people. I mean, there's times, as litigators, to put your litigator hat on and be difficult, stand your ground, and then there are other times, to give in, be accommodating, and work with people so you can resolve problems. It doesn't matter what area of law you're practicing in. The number one thing we do for people is we help them solve their problems. Because, if we get rid of the courthouse, if we get rid of the rule of law, then we just go to fighting in the streets, and there's a lot of countries that do that. But the one thing you come out as a lawyer is it's your job to figure out how to solve the problem. And so with Dusty, and what Dusty taught me is that he had a great reputation with all of the judges in Fort Worth and around the state. But most of all, in those relationships, Dusty told me, you're going to make mistakes, but the most important thing is to tell the truth. You want to be the type of guy that if you tell someone you're going to do it, you don't have to put it in writing. You're going to do it. And there have been times in the 25 years that things came up where I told a lawyer I would do something that, no, we didn't have, now we call it the Rule 11 agreement. We hadn't put it in writing. And there were times that I could have taken advantage of the situation or put the guy in a bad spot or lady, and you just don't do that. Live up to whatever you're going to tell someone you're going to do, and that goes a long way with people. Because if people can trust you, you don't have to put everything in writing, and it takes a lot less time in your practice if you're a guy that people can depend on and count on when you tell them you're going to do something. Where do they get their clients and business from? That's important when you're working with a firm, not to take the business as you leave, but to just figure out, okay, where does this lawyer get his business? Dusty Fillmore on the insurance defense side was entirely different than Dwayne Dent. Dusty had to deal with adjusters, And so he would go speak to adjusters to little seminars to see them, and then keeping that adjuster and that insurance company happy. Now, the insurance side and the defense side, you get your clients a little differently because they pretty much go by reputation. And then you be a young lawyer, you're working with an insurance defense firm, and through your reputation, as adjusters see your work, they'll gradually give you files, as you leave and you go on your own. Dwayne, on the other hand, being on the plaintiff side, was dealing with people. There are a lot of plaintiffs' firms that deal with unions. Keep the union happy, because the union will recommend a lawyer. Think about, where would you go, how would you find a lawyer if you were in a car wreck, if you were injured on the job, if you were hurt by a product? Who would you ask? Who do you think I ought to call? Dwayne also had a successful practice working with a traffic ticket lawyer. Jim Mallory in Fort Worth is pretty well known as, if you get a traffic ticket in Fort Worth, you go to Mallory. Well, one of the tricks with Mallory was, though, Mallory may like you. Jim Mallory's a neighbor of mine now. But it's kind of funny how it goes with Mallory referring you cases. Mallory's good for about 2 or 3 months. And then you don't see any cases really from Mallory. And you're like, what happened? Did I make Mallory mad? Anybody want to take a shot at probably what happens? And it's pretty consistent.
New.
I'm sorry?
He met somebody new.
Well, yeah, that could be. But no, on his staff, the phone receptionist lady, they change about every 3 months. So Dwayne had a routine that what he would do is every other month, on the 15th, he would make sure that whoever answered Mallory's telephone got flowers with his name and his card on it. So there are all sorts of ways to keep your name in front of people. And we can, I can go on endless stories, but pay attention to where do they get their clients from? How did they meet those people? And then you can adapt that for your practice when you go out on your own. Obviously, finances and costs, and I'm not going to get into details at this point on that, but just note that if you're there at your first job, figure out the finances of the firm. What are they spending money on? What are hard overhead costs? What are the soft costs? How do they finance this case? Learn the rules. Dusty and John Herrick were very good about this. They told me that John Herrick told me to take the Rule of Evidence book in Texas, and if you'll read 3 rules a night, you'll pretty well be able to go through the rule book over a certain period of time. And he said if you'll read the rules all the way through, you'll be ahead of 95% of the lawyers that litigate cases. And he said, and then what you do when you finish reading it once, you start over and you read it again. And that'll put you at the 99% level. And it is amazing how true that is. And I'll tell you where it's really true for you for the young lawyers is, you get a guy like me that knew the rules 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and then they come out and they change some of them. And the young guys, we now have in Texas requests for disclosures that came out that change up our interrogatories and our request for production. It's kind of silly. Instead of having 2 documents, you have 3. But I got taken to task 2 weeks ago by a young lawyer on what we have now as a 202 depot. It's a great little tool for a plaintiff, because if I have a case in and I'm not quite sure who I want to bring in the case or if there is a cause of action, I can file what's called a Rule 202 deposition. And that's a motion with the court, and the court decides, okay, 99 times out of 100 you're going to get it. Most lawyers call up and work with you, but basically I can go take the deposition of the defendant or a couple of key witnesses without them taking my client's deposition. And then I can kind of figure out where I'm going to go with the lawsuit. What's their story going to be? What defense are they going to raise? And I can plot my strategy. So I file that, which was pretty typical. And I get this young little whippersnapper on the other side, and he goes, well, which 202 are you taking? We're on the phone talking. I'm like, the 202 depot. What do you mean? And, I'd read the rule, but I did not know that there was a distinction between, and I still can't tell you what it is, but there's a distinction. I'll go look it up when I do it now. But if you notice the guy's deposition, and it is just to determine if there's a lawsuit, then you have to take the deposition of the witness in his county where he lives. Well, this guy lived out 100 miles from Fort Worth, and I wasn't going out there. So I had to figure out the other part of the rule, that I was going to file suit. Well, if I was going to file suit, though, then I had to let the other two companies potentially be available for the lawsuit, for the deposition. Well, anyway, too long a story on that little minor point, but that little kid kicked my tail on that. I ended up having to drive 100 miles out to take that stupid deposition. But learn the rules, and especially coming out, law school teaches you only so much. Take those rules in your rule book and whatever practice you're in and learn the rules. Brooks Harrington told me the way that he learned workers' comp in Texas was he took the Texas annotated statutes, the Blacks statutes, and he looked under workers' comp, and then he literally read every case that was under the rule book in the annotated portion. And it may sound like it takes a while, but you'd really be surprised that once you spend a day or two working on this, the cases start to flow and the concepts and the ideas get there. So learn the rules. Take chances, trust your instincts. That really leads into when and how do you go on your own. I went on my own, and my story was, it was Dwayne Dent and then Fred Streck and I. Dwayne's about 10 years older than I am, and it was the Dent Law Firm. And I was trying enough cases that I just wanted my name on the firm. Mine was Dent, Streck, and Haslam. And Dwayne and I are friends, and it really didn't have anything to do with money. A little bit. But I wanted the name on there. And Dwayne just said, no, it is always going to be the Dent Law Firm. And I just said, well, okay, I'm going on my own. Dwayne, great. Anything I can do to help you? Okay, well, that bluff didn't work. Next thing I knew, I had the Haslam firm. But I go back up to the relationships. Dwayne was a tremendous help to me. I left because I had a book of business, and I'll kind of come back to that, where lawyers, friends of mine, had been referring cases. And so I was able to take those cases with me when I left. Now, how do you do that? I had a very good banker that was loaned me the money to advance the costs on the cases, and that's basically what I pledged were the accounts receivables for my PI cases. So say my legal secretary, I don't call a case expense. That's overhead. I think you got to cover your overhead on your monthly income, and that's hard to do when you first start out. There's a lot of rules of thumb that you need about 6 months of money in the bank, and that's probably about right. A lawyer that had left before me told me that, I told him I was going to move in over the weekend and I'd be operating on Monday. He told me it'd be 9 months. And I thought he's crazy. It was 9 months. It's amazing. All the little stuff that you got to do to get going. And I would say that I wasn't practicing that Monday, but just as far as moving in, getting the operation set up, it took about 9 months to get the practice rolling. But I had a banker that allowed me to borrow money for the cost of the suit. So if I file suit, if I take a deposition, I handle cases on a contingent basis, so I'm at 35% pre-litigation, 40% litigation. And obviously you got to be flexible on that at times, but that goes to your attorney's fees. Then you get your expenses on top of that, or in addition to that. And those are what you want to borrow on. Try not to borrow money to cover your overhead, particularly your living expenses. That's just one of those deals that if you got to get up at 6 in the morning instead of get there at 8, get there at 6. But try to cover your monthly, your overhead by whatever money you're bringing in. And just what's the famous Harvard professor? How do you make money? If you make X, you spend X minus 1. And that's how you succeed in business. When and how do you go on your own, though? I got lucky. I say lucky. Again, you go back to relationships. I'd made a relationship with a banker when I was here, and I have kept that relationship through today. That ties into use your friends, but let me kind of finish this thought before we go on. Every step of the way when you're doing stuff, from here in law school to on your own to whatever's happened the last 10 or 15 years, I notice we have older people here, whatever's gone on in the past, you have relationships. If you're going to form your own firm, you need to rely on those. To this day, and I'm pretty proud of this, my paralegal and my legal secretary have been with me 12 years. My court reporter has been with me for 25 years. She took my first deposition. My accountant's been with me for 25 years. I've had the same bank for 25 years, despite 2008. I'll get to that in a minute. But, how do you go on your own? Let me save that and I'll come back to that. That's a big question. But for me, it was just a time in my career that I had enough money and I had the bank financing to make the step out. As they say in business, you can never have enough money. And you're going to have to take some chances and take some risk and trust yourself. But have some things in place through friends that you can count on to go do that. You're in trouble and so is the rest of the world. I like that. Most people, when they're coming out of law school, you guys are, in your third year here, and then all of a sudden you're going, well, it's been a hard run. I can't wait to get out. And now you're standing at that portal over there going, now what am I going to do? And for 10% of the kids, or 5%, or however many few jobs there are with the big firms, those kids have it easy. I think I'm really talking to the 85, 90% of us that needed work. Well, you're in trouble, but so is everyone else in the world. Okay, keep that in mind. You're not alone. Use your friends. I don't mean that in a bad way, but this is the time that you're in need. Call your friends up. Someone asked, how do you figure out when to specialize? And I'll come to that. But you never know what other people need work to do. It's amazing that at this point people don't know that I do auto wreck work. And I met a lady the other day that I'd known for about 5 years, and she knew I was a lawyer. And she said, I'm glad to know that I didn't know you handled auto wreck cases. My cousin or niece, whatever, was in a wreck a week ago. Can you help her out? Sure, here's my card, have her call me. You just never know what legal help your friends need. Call them. Just say, hey, listen, here's my number. If you need any work, I'm available to look at it. And here's what's important about that. Forget your specialty. If a buddy of yours calls you up, and this goes back to relationships, what I like to pride myself in is if any one of you called me up and said, I've got this issue in Fort Worth, Texas. I gotta stay by this thing. I've got an issue in Fort Worth, Texas. It's, pick anything. Probate. Someone died. Anyone know Steve Peters here in Tulsa? Steve's a good friend of mine. He's with a firm here, Riggs Abney. I don't know if anybody's heard of that firm. It's pretty well known, for a pretty good firm. But Steve works for them, and we've been lifelong friends. I filed suit for him in an adjacent county. I don't like to go over there. But it's a simple little case that I'm going to file. If it doesn't settle, I know the lawyer I'm going to call to refer it to. And I've already spoken to him. When your friends call you and say, I got a problem in probate court or whatever, be the one to get them the best lawyer for the job. And that doesn't mean the most expensive. A lot of times if someone says, we need a will probated, well, my next question is, well, okay, how much money are we talking about? Just a ballpark. And the idea there is maybe you do need the big firm. I mean, if you're talking about, I would say $500,000 or more estate, you want a big firm. And you want that big firm, one, because they generally have guys that know what they're doing, but you're also buying an insurance policy with that. Now, if you've got a guy with a $50,000, house that needs to have the name changed over, the big firm's going to kill you on the price. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And so what you want to do is find a solo lawyer that handles that. Now, I don't mean to say solo lawyers don't handle multi-million-dollar probates, but if you've got that person, be the one to know who that go-to person is. You have what's a surrounding county here? Creek. Someone has a criminal problem in Creek, know the 2 or 3 buddies you can call to handle that problem. And they need to be friends enough of yours that if there's a problem on the billing or the money, you can call them up and, give them some grief about it. There's some, if you refer to one of the, big lawyers, but you don't have a relationship with that lawyer, it's hard to control the fees. And I've just found that those relationships that you develop over the years of referring to this guy or lady, it's like a snowball. It starts to come back because that person has another problem, that friend has a problem, and next thing you know, call Bob Haslam down in Fort Worth and he'll know who to go for that issue. What court is it in? I'll never forget the first time I went down to a hearing with Dusty, and he goes, I was going up against D. Kelly. I don't know if anyone knows D. Kelly, but he represents Kelly Hart and Holman in Fort Worth. He represents the Bass family, American Airlines. He's been Democratic, if not party chair, the Democrat politician to go to in Fort Worth in the day. And I said, oh, Dusty, this isn't any big deal. I'm going to win this hearing. I'm going to quash this deposition. Really? Well, what judge are you in front of? I said, I don't know. I know the law, though, and we're going to win. And Dusty said, okay, well, let's, I don't think you are. I don't know anything about the motion, and I don't know what the law is. But I know the court, and I know the lawyer. But why don't you just go see how it goes, and let's come back and visit. And sure enough, I'd lost. I came back, and they were taking the deposition just like the other lawyer told me he was going to do. And I was kind of miffed. Like, what's that? This breaks the law. We need to appeal this. Of course, you don't appeal something like that. Dusty goes, well, you're learning a lot about the law. Number one, who the judge is and who the opposing counsel is huge. So little things like that, but it's those relationships that you know that. Especially in a big city, it gets harder and harder. Obviously, small town where everybody knows everyone, you can kind of figure out that, yeah, the lawyer that's going before the judge, his wife's second cousin is the best friend and his wife, and they're going to dinner or something tomorrow night. That's kind of important to know when you're going in for the hearing. But know those, and use your friends at this time when you're stepping out. Find someone to follow and share work. That's pretty easy. If you get a case, your friend calls you on a let's just use an auto case. The nice part about my practice in the contingent world is it's easy to split fees up. You know, for the most part, we pay a 20% referral fee, 25% referral fee. We used to pay a third, and we used to pay 50% at times. But those days are over with tort reform because your recovery's not as great, and we're having to work harder for it. So consequently, the referring lawyer is getting less. But the nice part about that is, say, ma'am, what's your name? I'm sorry? Tammy. Tammy calls up, not me, but you call another personal injury attorney on an auto wreck case and say, hey, I got a pretty simple case here, and I'd like, to work with you on it. Generally, what I would do in that is I'd say, sure, and, I would ask you, what do you want to do? Do you want to cover the cost in the case? Do you want my firm to front the cost? That goes into the bargain on the contingent fee. We work out a deal where you'll receive, say, a third or 50% of the case. A lot depends on, if it's a $10,000 or $15,000 car wreck, what I'd probably tell you to do is, why don't you file it? If you want to put my name on it, we'll work out 10% to me. And then you just call me and I'll walk you through that. And not just me, but other plaintiffs' lawyers I know in Fort Worth do that. We do it often and regularly. Because the important part of that for your client is that if that's a $10,000 case, but another lawyer can get 20, that's a huge difference for that client. And that's the number one person we're here to help is that client. You make a happy client, and it's hard a lot of times in the law, and you don't make them happy by money. You make them happy by telling them, this is the law, this is a reasonable outcome, I'm recommending you do this. Sometimes you got to tell them no. But the important part is you would watch how that lawyer handles that case. Okay, what did he file? Where did he file it? A lot of lawyers are out there. A lot of lawyers need work, older lawyers, believe it or not. And that's a great arrangement. The hourly work is probably shared the same way. I've done some hourly work with some attorneys where you share the fees with the client. I do part of the work and the other lawyer does part of the work. The most important part about that is, one, you avoid malpractice because you can always blame the older lawyer that's supposed to be good. And if there's a problem in the case, the client's not coming after the new lawyer. Okay, they figure you're broke anyway, so they're going to go after the older lawyer. People love to help. It goes without saying. Thank people. We don't thank people enough on little things. I call it the art of the handwritten note. In our days of email, and I know that's the popular thing, but I'm old-fashioned, and there's nothing like getting a little handwritten note, even if it's 3 or 4 sentences, but it's personal. It's directed to that person about something. Just, hey, thanks a lot. And they get that card and they remember you because it's something that 90% of us don't do enough of. Thank everyone as often as you can. Thank your banker. Thank your insurance people. Thank your accountant. And your name gets around. Enjoy yourself before you know it, you're old. And that's the number one thing. You guys, when you're going out of here, I know it's tough, and most people are sitting there wondering, how am I going to make my ends meet? But you're a lawyer. And I think it is one of the greatest responsibilities that we have in America to be a lawyer for our people. But also, we're there to help people, and we do make a difference in people's lives. So enjoy yourself. The number one thing under that is I play golf as my hobby. Have a hobby. I have some friends that are a little bit older than I am that are extremely successful, and they've made more money than they can know what to do with, and they're miserable. And I feel for them because they don't have any hobby other than going to that office. And you can imagine all of the train wrecks behind that with alcohol, divorce, family messes, kids are a mess. Find something in your life that you really enjoy and do it often and regularly. Golf for me is just a great break, not so much to play, but just to hit balls and practice and get out. Just get out of the office. It's running, tennis, whatever it is. Giving talks to great, yeah, well, that's supposed to go together. That's what you do. Now I guess I'm at the stage where what I do is I come talk to great, young, smart people. And I have no dispute that 99% of you here could probably kick my tail on the law. And that's great. And go enjoy yourself. You'll be surprised how much you really know when you trust your instincts. I have down reminders, calculators, water bottles. We have, in our firm, we got water bottles with H&G on it, with our phone number. You know, your business card is your one message to other people, but I did calculators. I'll give calculators to clients, but the most important thing, it has Haslam and Gallagher with your phone number on it. It's amazing how many of your clients, despite doing a great job for them, they don't remember your name, and they don't remember what you did, other than you're some lawyer that took 40% of the money. So keep your name in front of them that way. Now, let me jump down to hard costs. Any questions so far? Hard costs. I would say that running your own firm, if you're a one-man shop, you're looking at pretty much $10,000 a month, probably up to $20,000. That includes utilities, that includes everything, except what you're advancing on cases. So you need to be prepared, if you're going out for 6 months, to have about $60,000 available, up to about $120,000. If you're spending more than $20,000 a month on your office, you're living too well. Do you rent or do you own? I made the decision to buy our building at an interesting time. I was in a square footage at about $14 a square foot. And they came to me and wanted to raise it to 18 or 19 a foot. And I had a nice office. It was the Class A space. And so I asked a real estate buddy of mine to look around. And I didn't want to go from the 14 to 18 jump and then the $22 jump. So we bought a property back when rates were still at that 14. And basically what I found in owning a building is, it's not that it makes you a lot of money, but you've basically frozen your rent. Because you still have overhead with the building, you have taxes that go up, and you have insurance that you have to cover. But what you'll find is, if you can afford to get into the building, 20 years down the road, you have an asset that you can sell, but during that 20 years, you basically were able to freeze your rent, whatever it was that you bought in. Utilities, those kind of speak for themselves, but the reason I throw that little up there is we kind of blow that off or when we're thinking about it, but sit down and write down, when I talked about that $10,000, every possible expense that you can imagine you're going to have. And figure out, is it an annual number or is it a monthly? A lot of times we take an annual number and we just assume that we're going to pay that in December. If you're going to carry legal malpractice insurance, and I don't know that you necessarily need to do that starting off. That can be kind of an expense you don't want to incur. But that insurance number a lot of times is due in January. Well, that's where your first quarter of the year, if you start in January, your first quarter is usually your most expensive. Bank interest, when you're borrowing money from the bank, try to get a quarterly payment, not a monthly payment. Salaries, starting off, what I went with, and the ladies, and that's maybe why we're all together after 12 years, is, we have more staff than those two, but I did a monthly, kind of a small monthly salary with the idea that we would have a bonus at the end of the year. And, we'd look at it at that point, and that works out real well in your first couple of years starting out. It saves your cash flow in your first 6 months to a year. And yet at the same time, your employees know that, okay, if you hit a case and we start doing well financially, I know I'm going to be okay at Christmas, and you can make up that way. Case expenses I've already talked about. Policies and procedures. I found this to be very, very important. Sit down and write out your policies and procedures. I have a very detailed policy and procedure book that what I do is basically from the time the case comes in my office until it's closed, I have written down exactly what I want to have happen. Now there's a little tree off of that. You know, if this happens, then you go here. If something else happens, you go over here. But I have a very detailed policy and procedure manual that it takes time to draft this. At the same time, I find that it's a good exercise for you that if you've gone through every step of your case of how you want it handled, one, it helps categorize it, whatever, in your brain, but it also communicates it to your legal secretary or your assistants. They can open the book, you know, when you're running through. I can talk a little fast sometimes. And I think I'm communicating something when I'm not. They always have the policy and procedure book. They can go back and go, okay, wait a minute. Bob said he wanted this medical. Okay. I get the affidavit with it. I send a cover letter. Here's the form with it that I have. I find that very important. It also helps at the end of the year. I like to ask my staff. We have an annual meeting, and we're fixing to do it again. In the first week of January, we'll have a little retreat somewhere. When you first start out, it's in your office conference room. And if you can talk to the secretary into bringing the donuts, you don't have to pay for those. But we go over them. You know, at any time that Linda or Dale or Jennifer, Tracy, our team, or Pat Gallagher, a partner, they see something that we need to change. Let's modify this procedure. You know, we go over it then, and we change it, and be flexible on that. It's amazing when you put your staff in charge of ideas and how things should run. They sometimes have a lot better idea than you do. I walk through a case, client through the policy and procedure, try to cover every possible issue, and my favorite book is, has anyone read that? Southwest Airlines came out with a book, I thought it was 5 years ago, it's probably 10. And it's called Nuts, and it's about how Southwest Airlines runs their airline. I think it's a great book, and it's a great read. I put in there, in our policy and procedure manual, many of their ideas. I also like, there's the Ritz-Carlton, the gold standard, that book on how the Ritz-Carlton runs. I think that's a great model for you and your law firm to run it like the Ritz-Carlton does. Ritz-Carlton and, Domino's. Dwayne had this saying. He goes, we had an annual meeting going over this stuff, and Dwayne goes, what is Domino's? And we have a hotel in Dallas called, has anybody familiar with the Mansion? Okay, one of the top, call it the Ritz-Carlton. I think everyone's heard of that. What does the Ritz-Carlton and Domino's Pizza have in common? Anybody know? Take a crack at it. Domino's tells you they're going to deliver that pizza in 30 minutes. Or they used to. Now, they stopped advertising after they killed a few people. But that's still the idea is you're going to get that pizza in 30 minutes. Ritz-Carlton, why do people pay outrageous sums for food or a hotel room? Service. Both of them have the service. They make a promise and they deliver it. And that's the same with your law practice. One of the first things I tell clients when they're sitting there and, you know, they're like, you get 35% or 40%? Yes, I do. I tell my clients right off, I am very expensive. And if you don't like it, you can go somewhere else. But service, and just tell your clients, like, why do we buy polo shirts? What are they now? How much is a polo shirt? $80? It used to be 40, but what is it, 80? You know, and then what's the old, I'm sorry?
90 or 95.
Yeah, there you go, 90, 95, and yet you can buy the exact same shirt off the rack without the little horse on it for what, $35? People want the name. People pay for that. And don't be afraid to charge the client. When they come in and you figure out what it's going to cost, charge them appropriately. Now, if you don't have any work after a week or so, maybe you can come down a little bit. But don't be afraid to charge the clients, because the last thing you need to get into, and I see way too many lawyers, I do legal malpractice, and so I see too many lawyers that got in a case and they didn't price it right coming in, and before you know it, it's part of the 10% of your cases that takes 90% of your work, and you hate it and you don't like it, and that's not good, because then you don't do the service for the client that you need to. But on nuts, another thing that came out about Southwest Airlines out of that was your staff is more important than any client. And we put that in our policy and procedure book, and we tell our clients, you need to understand, if you cause a problem for Linda, Linda is number one. If you cause a problem for my paralegal, we're done. You can go get another lawyer. And I think when your staff hears that you put them ahead of clients, you put your staff ahead of making money, they will produce for you far beyond whatever you're paying them. So that's why I have the nuts up there. Haslam and Gallagher, here's our information. We try to keep it short and simple. We do have a comma after the R on Gallagher and periods after the LLP, but we have our address and our web page. And I think on your business card and on your web page, put that phone number up there where they can click on it immediately. How many times have people gone on the apps and you try to find the phone number? That's all you want to do is call, and you're sitting there having to punch. So make it easy for your clients. On our webpage, and y'all can go to it, I don't know if anybody's got a computer, but we also try to have directions to our firm on the front page. Highlight the case area where we're going, and then we have a statement about our firm and what we believe is important. And let me come back to your webpage. Design your webpage not only for your client's use, but remember the opposing lawyer, that's the first thing they're going to pull up. I mean, that's what I do. If I want to know who is this lawyer, I haven't heard of him, I pull up their webpage. Okay, what are they advertised in? Oh, okay, this guy's decided to come in on this personal injury case, and he's a commercial real estate lawyer. That's pretty good. That demand went up about 25%. But they'll check you out. Also, jurors. In this day and time, those judges can tell those jurors, don't go back and look at the scene. What is that guy not hitting Google Maps right then, or does he wait 10 minutes? And they just can't help themselves. At the same time, I'm not going to go off on. I'm not a TV advertised guy. But think about your web page. If a juror is pulling it up, is that the message that you want to send to that juror? Millions of dollars of verdicts, wow, that's a death knell. I'll say that for a whole nother story. Contract with the client, let me cover that pretty quickly. This is very important, is your contractual relationship with your client. There's a great lawyer in Fort Worth that's he's great, much better than I am, and I copy his contract, okay? Anytime you get a better lawyer's contract, take from it, copy it, ask him if you can have a copy of it. Figure out going in if you're going to do a contingent or an hourly or a blend. And it's very important that you have that in writing with your client. I think that a client is more impressed with a lawyer if from the very get-go you are insistent on a contract between you two. When your buddy calls you, have a written agreement for how you're going to be paid, even if it's free. The blend is a contingent hourly. I'm not going to get into all of that, but as you note there, be aware of this. Texas Ethics 610 just came out with some opinion that if you take a security interest in the case, it's a avoidable contract. Well, we had a client that we went to trial with, and I don't know what advice they got. Why the bankruptcy lawyer didn't call us, we don't know. But we got a little verdict for about, say, $20,000. And the expenses were $13,000, and she was upset. Okay, well, we were gonna waive our fee, and she'd get back about $7,000. We just wanted her expenses. She filed bankruptcy. Okay, well, why we did that? Because now she gets zero, but that's another question. But however, in bankruptcy, in my contingent contract I've used forever, I did not have in it that we had a security interest in the insurance proceeds or the lawsuit. So I put that in our future contracts. Now, our bankruptcy counsel, a friend of mine, he thinks we're going to be able to get the expenses back. He knows the trustee, and while it's not a secured interest, it's presumed to be secured. I don't know, there's some bankruptcy law that's going to get me paid. So that's good. But so we added the word security interest in there. Well, lo and behold, a year later, now we come out with an ethics opinion that says you can't have the word security interest in there. So be aware of those, little nuances in the law that make sure you get paid. Avoid bankruptcy. Just a couple of key points here. Andrew Carnegie, the way that he made money, if you'll recall back in the day, was he cut costs. It wasn't that he made more money than anybody else, but he kept his overhead low. Keep it low until you find your specialty. Know the tax laws. Tax laws are very important in our profession. For example, as a trial lawyer, I cannot write off, I have $50,000, say, in a case right now. I can't write that off, even though I spent that money in 1210. Now, a guy in real estate goes and puts $50,000 in a property, he gets to write that off. Well, that's nice. And it's not fair, but tough. That's the law. But you need to know that. At the same time, when you recoup those expenses in the future, they're not taxable then, even though they're years later. But there are a lot of little nuances in the tax laws that you need to sit down with your accountant and figure out what the tax laws are. I've already talked, only borrow for money, for items that make you money. Don't borrow for the vacation. These are just standard ideas in business. And I talked about that as the difference between your overhead and your costs. Use your friends. Think of everyone that you're involved with. Experts, accountants, insurance agents, bankers. These are all people that you're going to have business relationships in. Take care of them. You never know. My accountant stopped by and saw him today. I still use my accountant here in Tulsa. And he has a buddy that he just got a call from last night, and I'm going to help them on a case next week. So you just never know where they're going to come from. Resources. Local trial lawyers organization obviously is for me. Every one of your areas of law has an organization. If you'll go as a young lawyer and you'll tell them, I'd like to come to your lunches, whatever it is, real estate, you've got the list. Dean, do they post a list here of lunches in Tulsa? Yeah. And the website, there you go. I am getting old. I hate that website. But use those. Go to the luncheons. We're more than happy to have young law students coming in or old law students, whatever, come to our meetings. And then you'll meet people in there. And it's relationships and it's contacts. State and national organizations. Young lawyers was tremendously important for me. And I served young lawyers, and I loved serving in it, and ended up holding some offices in young lawyers. But young lawyers was great because I think the rule is it's up to age 35, or we have in Texas, I guess Oklahoma does, up to 10 years starting practice. Even if you're 45, that is a great organization to be a part of because you'll meet everyone in the same boat that's just starting out. You meet big firm lawyers, you meet small firm lawyers. They're a lot of fun. They're much more fun than your older organizations. And take advantage of young lawyers. That served me very well from the standpoint that I was able, back to your relationships and your credibility, I was able to meet lawyers in the big firms or the insurance defense side that I would have never met socially. Number one, I didn't care to speak to any of them, but at least there I was thrown in with them. And at the same time, they got to meet you. They got to see what kind of person you were. It's amazing how many cases I get referred to us from insurance defense lawyers. The insurance defense lawyer has a case where his family member's been hurt by a State Farm driver. He can't handle the case. And there's a lot of conflicts in the big firms that you can get cases from. And young lawyers is the way to meet them. Everybody's meeting off on the same foot, and now, here we are 25 years later, we went to a party the other night, and I just didn't realize, time passes by, and obviously I supported them, but out of our group of about 15 or 20 of us that are core members, or did a lot together, we have 4 judges and a congressman in just our little group. And it's amazing over time how your relationships start to feed on each other. Speak, and when I mean speak, I don't mean going to the national organization to speak. I'm talking about your schools, your civic areas. The system of law is under brutal attack by the media and special interest groups. There are special interest groups with lots of money that have one goal, is to get rid of trial by jury. And I just don't feel that's right. This country was founded on it, but it's important to get the message out so people understand that. You don't have, we don't have, no one has millions of dollars to spend on TV advertising. But it is so important for people to understand how the law works. And you do that by giving back your time, like, PTA meetings, civic areas, political functions. Go talk and answer questions. Your first checks. I say save a little, 10%, tithing, the church rule. It's a great rule for your private practice. Every year, I try to pretend it's the best year I'll ever have. And if that was the case, how would I handle money, as I call the good Lord gave me to use for the year, but how would you handle that? And however you want to set that up, it's your personal decision. But I like to ask that question as I'm going on or going through the year. The 10%. Take 10% and pretend like it never happened. We have there's a very nice deal, and you need to know this as a referring lawyer too, if you don't do injury work. But when someone's injured and the insurance company is going to pay a settlement, you can structure that money. It is a great tool for someone that's injured so they don't have to worry about how they're going to handle the money. Because as soon as they get money, all the salespeople in the United States, for some reason, call them. All the brokers, all the real estate, everybody's got a deal for your client. You can also structure your attorney's fees. That's very important. It's not that they're tax-free to you, but you can delay the taxes on them. That's a complicated vehicle, but know that that is out there. There are many lawyers now. I have structured some of my fees, and it is very nice to have what they call, the mailbox money. All of a sudden, you get old enough and they start paying. But, that January, I'm going to get a little check. I've forgotten all about that case. But if you can set some of your money aside in those as you go along, and Craig Wade is a structure broker friend of mine in Dallas, we can answer all those questions later. But just know that that is out there. So if you refer a case and the lawyer sends you a $25,000 referral fee, or that's coming in, you may decide, what? I'd like to maybe structure my fee where I don't get part of that for 5 or 10 years down the road. But just know that that's available. Bankers. I've got some very good friends that are bankers. I don't know what to do with these boys. They give you an umbrella when it's sunny and they take it away when it starts to rain. I'd been at this bank, love these guys, but 2008 hit and they called everybody's notes. It didn't matter what you had. You had to show that you could pay that note off. And you need to know it and be ready. That day could come at any moment when they decide, your credit card company decides, well, we think we're going to lower your credit. Oh, that's just great. But you need to have a contingency for that. So you need to have 2 bankers. 2 bankers are really nice because the one banker is always friendly if you've got more money at banker A. And there are other ways to do that, and I'm happy to answer questions on it. But I think it's very important to know that. I had a couple of friends that weren't ready for that when it hit and didn't have a contingent, and they had to quit their private practice and go work for a bigger firm. 2008's been here. The financial markets can come back again, and you got to be ready for that. Insurance coverage, be picky. Don't take the first one that comes along. There's lots of different coverages that you have. And as we get older, this is a personal note, the most important coverage I think you can buy is this long-term care. Anyone has parents, grandparents, and you're dealing with issues there, get you some long-term care. Play hard for your clients. Kind of wrap up here. Let me see, what do I have left? Settlement? Yeah. Let me do the settlement first. This is a little bit like contracts. There's a lot more to settlement agreements than, the check's coming in 2 weeks. Here's our little agreement with indemnities. The lawyer being personally liable, Medicare, Medicaid I've got to deal with. A great lawyer once taught me on a settlement, the battle's only just begun when you put down what's going to be in that settlement agreement. A lot of times on settlement agreements, particularly in my area, you have an apology. Sometimes an apology is worth a lot of money to a client. Know from your client what they want. That can go a long way to getting, number one, them trusting you that it's not just about the money. Know the confidentiality laws. There's a tax law out there that if you agree to confidentiality, but you don't put in there, an amount for it, and there's a dispute about that, but that can be taxable. You can take a personal injury settlement that's all tax-free, and if you screw up the settlement agreements, the IRS can come tax that amount. It's the basketball player out of Dennis Rodman. Rodman had a big issue with a girl in a room, and it cost him about $250,000. But the IRS came in and taxed it, saying that wasn't a settlement for the crime. That was a settlement to buy confidentiality. So they taxed it. It's the Rodman opinion. But just know that's out there. When paid, I can't tell you how many lawyers enter into a PI settlement with an insurance company, but they don't have when they're going to get paid. The insurance company likes 2 weeks. 2 weeks is fine, but have that date in there so it's an enforceable agreement that you can sue on when they don't pay you. I've touched on structures. I'll answer that later. I want to leave you with just play hard for your clients. If anything, have fun. And this kind of brings me to, let me also say, what area do you specialize in? I don't think any of us know. I think you fall into it. I just kind of, from a progression, I started having some success at certain types of cases, and, you just keep running down the river of what's working. It's different for everybody. Now, there's some people that have a passion. My daughter, I can tell you right now, is going to do, if she ends up going to law, she'll go into art law. That's just something she has a passion for. It's a very unique niche. If you have a unique niche like that, stay with it. We don't all have to be litigators or whatever is the idea out there, but have fun. Find something you enjoy doing, because it'll allow you to play hard for your clients. Call them back, please. One of the best things I think we do is if a client calls me, I'm calling them back within 24 hours, whether I'm in trial, I'm out of trial, I'm on vacation. Call them back. If it's 7 or 8 o'clock at night, I find that clients really appreciate that. It's not just 9 to 5 job. Tell them the bad news. I think that's the most important thing you do as a lawyer. I had a client that had to come in last week, and I love her to death. There's no way she can give a history, and she fell on some shoes at a Dillard's or JCPenney or something. I didn't think that, there was any way we were going to prevail on this. I told her I'd look at it, though, and I knew the defense lawyer, and I asked him for a copy of the video. And he sent it to me. And it's not that I couldn't have taken that case and could we get a $5,000, $10,000 settlement? Maybe. But I sat down with her and I walked her through the video, and I just said, look, I don't believe we have a case. And I find that clients, even though they're not happy, and there was no way to convince her that day, I told her to think on it. I didn't just dismiss her right there. I think that's important. Let the client have some time to think about it. Give them a week. We're not in a hurry. And they much prefer hearing bad news, but knowing a lawyer looked at it, knowing a lawyer evaluated it. They're free to go get another lawyer. Then they are being promised, the bright, rosy future, even on a great case. With tort reform, it makes it a lot easier to explain all the limits on what their recovery is. But I think that's very important. And don't lose sight that that's one of the reasons they hired you. Be ready to say no. And Jerry Spence told me one time at one of his camps, and I think it is so true, I love that. When they call you, okay, and you don't think you ought to take that case, don't take it. Because it's not the last time your telephone's going to ring. With that, let me leave you with what I think is the best thing we can all do is leave the campground better than you found it. And with that, good luck, and I wish all of you the best, and thank you very much for having me. And any questions?